Well, listen, Sarah, it's quiet in the region this morning, but of course that comes after a fiery night, literally so, given the incendiary balloons that were hurled across the border, causing 2 fires in this area. As you mentioned, the IDF responding by hitting a Hamas facility that was used for producing balloons and other weaponry, as well as hitting a chute for what the IDF calls a terror tunnel. Also, of course, last night, those protests along the border that led to clashes with IDF troops, and according to Palestinian sources in the Gaza Strip, to 11 injuries on the Palestinian side. Also in the last hour, Sarah, Prime Minister Bennett, before taking off for his return to Israel from Washington, telling reporters, among other things, that Israel will, quote, act according to its interests in Gaza, and that Bennett and the Israeli government sees Hamas as the, quote, address. Sarah, I read those comments as 2 things. Number one, telling Israelis that Israel is not going to accede to American demands, for example, for restraint, even if those demands were made, and there's no reporting of specific demands of that sort being made. And also, I think of a hint, Sarah, to the Israeli public that a forceful response might not come immediately, Bennett potentially trying to deflect blame in the short term about not responding decisively enough, even after years in the opposition, Sarah, when he said that he was going to respond forcefully to any provocation from the Strip. But as the former Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon famously said, what you see from here isn't always what you see from there. And Bennett, now sitting in the Prime Minister's chair, may understand there are a number of factors to be weighted in deciding what kind of response to make in a situation like this, and may have decided, on one hand, has decided to respond, certainly, but may have decided not to respond as forcefully and as disproportionately as some Israelis, certainly in this part of the country, would like to see.
Oh, and tell me, does either side want an escalation from here?
The Israeli side, naturally, Sarah, doesn't. Israel, as always, is quite happy to preserve quiet, certainly for the people living in this region. On the other side of the border in the Gaza Strip, as always, it's a question mark and an unknown. So many times over the course of the last 15 years, Sarah, we've had Israeli experts saying that Hamas doesn't want an escalation, only to find that they do. The consensus, for what it's worth at this point, is Hamas is not interested in a full-fledged escalation of the sort that we saw in May with a full-scale conflict, but is interested in provoking Israel along the border to keep up a sense of conflict and of conflagration, potentially to try to get better terms for the transfer of money into the Strip, that money coming under a newly agreed paradigm, the money coming from Qatar into the Strip, not through the infamous cash suitcases in the past, but through bank accounts. Hamas may want to change that system, and this may be its way of trying to get what it wants by putting pressure on Israel.